Hey guys, tonight we're crawling into the cramped stairwell of a Roman apartment building, yes. A real one with a to-do list as long as the Appian Way, and none of the glamour. You're the insula's superintendent, which basically means janitor, part-time plumber, overworked referee, and occasionally, human complaint sponge. You wake before the sun, in a room the size of a pantry. Because there's always a new leak, a weird smell, or a tenant trying to cook fish on a wood stove that really shouldn't be holding fire anymore. And if you think this day's going to be restful, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, drop your location and the local time in the comments. Let's see who else is wandering these ancient halls with us tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to a rooster's voice echoing down the corridor, which is ridiculous because no one in your 5-story Roman apartment building owns a rooster. Someone must have bartered it up from the forum again. You squint through the dark. There's already movement in the hallway. Distant footsteps, a crash, someone cursing in Latin. Morning has officially begun. You push off the straw mat, back cracking like old tiles, and immediately stub your toe on a chipped amphora of pickled cabbage. Breakfast, well, it was yesterday's breakfast. You kick it aside and pull on your tunic, which smells like brick dust and olive oil. Your fingers brush the wax tablet hanging by the door, your sacred artifact, your to-do list. You step into the corridor. The air is damp, full of plaster flakes, and that unique Roman scent, mildew-wet sandals, and slightly burned bread. The baker on the first floor must have fired his oven too early again. You'll have to check it. Your first task, however, is the water leak on floor 2, again. Always floor 2. The staircase creaks as you descend, dodging a bucket of something unidentifiable placed in the corner, probably definitely used for everything except that. You hold your breath and sidestep the suspicious liquid pooled around it. The second floor groans under your sandals, every board with its own complaints. You reach the landing just in time to hear a door creak open. Out pops Terentia, Floor 2's self-appointed spokesperson, and possibly Rome's most active gossip. She points upward, chin trembling with the sheer weight of judgment. The ceiling's weeping again, she says. Woke me up like a ghost crying over bad plumbing. You nod, offer a tight smile, and try not to sigh too audibly. She continues, without breath. Also, the boy upstairs ran through the hallway naked again. I'm not saying it's a crime, but it felt illegal. You pat the wax tablet on your hip and scratch in, check ceiling, worn boy. Welcome to your morning. You inspect the water damage. It's worse than you thought. The clay coating on the ceiling's flaking. Little pink pebbles scattering over the hallway floor like breadcrumbs for rat switch. By the way, you also need to deal with the leak has grown a personality. It drips with attitude, a soft plinking rhythm that somehow mocks you. You touch the corner of the ceiling and squelch moisture seeps through. Great upstairs. Neighbor's bath is probably overflowing again. Of course it is. You climb to the 3rd floor. As you do, the smell shifts from moldy bread to something much, much worse. You knock. No answer. You knock again, harder. Finally, the door creaks open, and a bleary-eyed man in a half-buttoned tunic blinks at you like he's forgotten what mornings are. You glance over his shoulder, steam everywhere. The man is sweating like a gladiator at intermission. "I just warmed the bath too long," he mumbles. "You boiled the ceiling, you deadpan." Again. He shrugs, as if this is somehow your fault. You mark the tablet. Patch ceiling. Lecture steamer. Another notch on your morning survival chart. Back on the second floor. You find Terentia now clutching a loaf of bread that could double as a weapon. She eyes you like you're part of the problem. You apologize unconvincingly and promise a full repair. She demands a deduction on her rent, which you do not have the authority to grant, but you promise to consider it, which means no. As you pass by the first-floor bakery, the scent of slightly overcharred bread smacks you in the face. The baker waves. His name is Claudius, and his bread is edible if you like your molars to suffer. He offers you a crust as tribute, which you accept and pretend to chew with enthusiasm. He's one of the few tenants who hasn't threatened to stab you with a curtain rod yet. Before you return upstairs, you peek into the storage alcove behind the stairs. A rat darts out. You flinch, mostly from embarrassment. It's probably the same rat from yesterday. You've started calling him Tribunus. You tell yourself you'll deal with him tomorrow. Again, one last check before you retreat upstairs. The roof tiles. Yesterday's windstorm knocked a few loose, and you have no desire for spontaneous skylights today. You brace yourself and climb to the top. The city opens before Ured rooftops, distant temples, a thin veil of smoke curling from chimneys, and the distant cry of a market vendor who's been shouting the same pitch since Tiberius was a toddler. The tiles are, of course, worse than expected. One hangs by a miracle. You nudge it back into place with the kind of precision that only comes from sheer luck and moderate fear of heights. The wind picks up and nearly steals your tunic. You press your hand to the roof's edge and whisper a silent prayer to whatever minor god manages terracotta. Back inside, your tablet already feels heavier. It's barely mid-morning and you've got water damage, possible structural issues, one nude child warning to issue a rogue rat, and a neighbor convinced her ceiling is mourning the gods. Just another normal day in the Roman apartment complex, and that's before anyone's even flushed the latrine. You head back to your closet-sized room to catch your breath. But of course, that doesn't happen. No sooner do you sit on the edge of your straw mat than someone pounds on your door like they're trying to summon Jupiter himself. You crack it open, and there stands Gaius from the third floor, a man whose facial expression permanently hovers between mild panic and indigestion. He's red-faced, barefoot, and gesturing wildly. "Something's wrong with my floor," he says. "It's breathing." You blink. "Breathing," he nods, "like moving. When I step on it." You sigh, grab your wax tablet, and follow him upstairs again, because apparently, one walk up those stairs wasn't enough to make your knees hate you today. You reach his room and, sure enough, when you step near the center of the floor, the wood beneath your sandals creaks and lifts, just slightly, but definitely. It's like the building itself is trying to exhale. You press your palm to the planks. There's heat. Not warm like bathwater. Hot. You squint at the corner of the room. That's when you notice the faint wisp of steam rising from the crack between two tiles. You don't say it aloud, but you're pretty sure this isn't normal. Historians still argue whether underfloor heating in Insulae was ever a real thing or just a feature of wealthy homes. But if someone down there has tried to install their own hypocostum, you're going to scream. Back to the second floor you go. Sure enough, Plautus, the amateur tinkerer, is in his room with half a brazier under his floorboards, trying to make winter pleasant using a clay pot, a fire, and questionable math. You ask him if he's lost his mind. He says he read about it in a scroll. You tell him scrolls aren't blueprints. He offers you a dried fig in apology. You don't take it. You scratch a note onto your wax tablet. Evict fire from under Plautus. Reinforce third floor. Then, you mutter a little prayer to Vulcan. Because if there's one thing worse than a leaky ceiling, it's spontaneous combustion. Back out in the hall, you hear shouting from above. Floor 4. Again you trudge up slowly, this time counting the steps because it helps distract from your aching calves. 47 steps later, you reach the landing and find another classic Roman apartment drama playing out. Two tenants in a full-blown shouting match over laundry. Apparently, someone's tuniquince white is now a subtle shade of purple. Accusations fly. Dyes are blamed. Someone mentions goat urine. You step between them with your most authoritative glare. You've used it on landlords, street vendors, and once on a very confused goose. It works, sort of. You promise to investigate and suggest they use separate wash basins next time. They both grumble. You pretend not to hear it. Historians today argue whether Roman laundries used human urine for cleaning. Spoiler, they did. The smell, unforgettable. Not in a good way. Back downstairs, a child runs past again. Still naked. Still holding the chicken. You call after him. Tell your mother to clothe you, or the augurs might think you're a sacrificial offering. He laughs, like that's a compliment. Maybe it is. You pass the central stairwell again and spot something new. A clay tablet nailed to the wall. It reads, Floor 3, cursed enter with offerings. You stare at it for a second, then sigh. Terentia must have added it. Again, you gently pry it off and toss it in the bin. That's the third curse warning this month. It's amazing what people will blame when their bath overflows or their figs go bad. By midday, your wax tablet is more scar than surface. You pause long enough to chew a fig and contemplate life choices. You once thought about joining the army or apprenticing with a mosaic artist instead. You manage a building where the walls moan, the pipes scream, and the tenants think curses are a form of pest control. And yet, you wouldn't trade it. Not really. There's something satisfying about holding it all together, about knowing where the beams groan in winter and which stair creaks like a drunk poet. You know every leak, every cranky neighbor, every child's footstep before it even hits the floor. This isn't just a building, it's a beast, a living thing, and you are its heartburn. You check your tablet. Next up, fix the storage latch, track the source of that sulfur smell, and finally maybe find the owner of that rooster. You could just eat it, but something tells you that wouldn't go over well. Before you go, you glance up the stairwell. Somewhere above, someone drops a pot. It clangs down 4 floors before smashing near the bakery. You close your eyes. Just breathe. You'll clean it up, eventually. But first, the cursed 3rd floor awaits. Again, you trudge toward the third floor again, wax tablet clutched like a shield and sandal threatening to peel at the toe. By now, this floor has earned a reputation, not just for the leaks and the creaks, but for the ambiance. There's always a smell, always a sound, always some small chaos nibbling at your nerves. You pause on the landing, take a deep breath, and press on like a gladiator entering the arena, except instead of lions, it's Lucia and her weekly crisis. Her door opens before you can even knock. "It's back," she whispers, eyes wide. You stare at her. "What's back?" She looks around, lowers her voice. The dripping, you blink, from the ceiling. "No," she says. From the floor you squint. So ... Water is dripping upward now. She nods solemnly. You step into her apartment. Everything smells faintly of cinnamon and despair. The source of the sound is, indeed, a rhythmic plip. Plip, plip, but it's echoing in such a strange way that you can't immediately place it. You kneel down and press your ear to the floor, and that's when you realize the sound is coming from inside the wall, not dripping, scratching. Great double quotes. "Do you keep anything alive in the walls?" you ask. Lucia shrieks. You don't wait for an answer. You head down to the storage cellars beneath the first floor, ducking past hanging laundry and a suspicious number of dead potted plants. The storeroom door groans as you push it open, and the familiar, cool, moldy air of underground Rome surrounds you. The scratching gets louder. You light a small oil lamp. Shadows flicker across the brick walls. You scan the corners in, then you see it, a rat. But not just any rat. The biggest rat you've ever seen, possibly two rats fused together through sheer spite. It stares at you, lifts a piece of dried fig, and begins to eat it like a judgmental landlord. You stare back, slowly lowering your lamp. You're not ready for this fight. Not without backup. You log it anyway. Rat size of toddler third floor wall. Consider new god. Back upstairs, Lucia is burning rosemary. To ward off whatever that was, she mutters. You offer her a tight-lipped nod and an even tighter promise to look into it soon. Then you bolt before she ropes you into a full-blown exorcism. At the top of the stairwell, Gaius, yes, again waves you over. "The duck's missing," he says. You pause. "The one in the bathtub." He nods gravely. "She escaped. Her name was Minerva." You stare at him. "So now we have a sacred runaway duck." He shrugs. "If you see her, don't startle her. She hates sandals." You scribble it down. Loose duck Minerva void, sudden movement. Somewhere in the background, a crash echoes from the fourth floor, followed by a dramatic sigh. Probably Terentia again. You head toward the sound, only to be stopped halfway by a child holding a wax figure of you angrily poking it with a stick. You raise an eyebrow. He scampers off, giggling. A mainstream historical fact for your troubles. Roman apartment blocks, or insulae, often lacked proper sanitation and were notorious for their fire hazards and collapses. In fact, many city laws were eventually written specifically to regulate how high they could be built, and how much space had to be left between them. Spoiler, no one listened. By the time you get back to your room, your legs feel like cooked lentils. You collapse onto your mat and exhale like a man twice your age. You check your wax tablet again. The list is now 12 items long and growing. By the hour, leaks, rats, spiritual phenomena. One rogue waterfowl. Your sanctuary. The one spot of peace in this whole building is your window. You crack it open and let the city sounds in. The calls of vendors, the clatter of carts, the occasional donkey complaints. You spot your neighbor hanging laundry, singing badly. A cat on the adjacent rooftop balances with the smugness of a creature who's never had a job, and you sit there and breathe. One fringe fact. While you're at it, it's rumored that some Roman superintendents had secret side hustles renting out storage space, running errands for bribes, even hosting illegal gambling in the basements. You're not saying you've considered it, but if someone offered a denarius to find a missing duck, you wouldn't say no. You rest for 5 whole minutes before someone pounds on your door again. It's a teen girl from the top floor. The tiles just moved, she says. You sigh like all of them. She adds. You sigh louder. Also, the rooster came back, and it brought a friend. You stop, mid-s. You stop mid-sigh and stare at her. Wait, there are now 2 roosters. She nods, deadly serious. They're fighting in the stairwell. I think they're in love. You don't write that down. You simply stand, grab your sandals, and prepare yourself mentally for the next round of absurdity as you make your way back up. Sure enough, on the 2nd floor landing, there they are, 2 roosters flapping, posturing, and It's less of a battle and more of a deeply confusing courtship. One of them is wearing what looks like a scrap of purple fabric tied around its neck. You're not sure whether to intervene or let them work it out. You clap your hands. Nothing. They barely blink. One of them struts toward you with such audacity that you step aside. It pecks at your sandal. You mumble an apology. The hallway now belongs to them. You scrawl. Stairwell dual rooster occupation. Ongoing negotiations pending. Back on the 3rd floor, you return to Lucia's place, if only to check if the scratching has stopped or if the rat has claimed. Squatters' rights. She's taped a sprig of laurel to the wall where the noise was. Protection, she says. You don't bother correcting her. You tap on the wall again, but it's silent now. Either the rat has relocated or it's plotting. Probably both. You leave, closing her door gently so as not to upset whatever spirits she thinks you've disturbed. As you descend again, you're intercepted this time by a man you don't recognize. New tenant. Ah, yes, 5B. He's holding a very serious scroll and looking very seriously lost. Where does one find the latrine? He asks. You point. Past the courtyard, behind the fig tree, left at the amphory, that smell like feet. He looks horrified. Don't wait too long. You add. You write down a note for yourself. Post a sign. Latrine gives this way. Brave traveler. A mainstream fact for your listeners. Roman apartment buildings usually had shared latrines at ground level or in courtyards. If you lived on the upper floors and didn't want to trek all the way down, you used a chamber pot tanned, then dumped it out the window. Legally speaking, you were supposed to yell first. But let's just say not everyone followed protocol. You dodge under a laundry line, someone's tunic smacks you in the face. Step into the central courtyard. It's bustling. Someone's baking something that smells aggressively like onions. Kids are chasing each other with wax figures again, and a man is complaining loudly about his missing sandals. You recognize them? They're hanging from a window on the 4th floor like flags of victory. You're about to head back inside when a woman calls out to you. She's holding a clay pipe. This came out of my wall, she says. Should it be in there? You take the pipe. It's cracked. Slightly damp. You sigh. Where did it come from? Above the hearth, she says, but also near the bed. Maybe the hearth bed. That's not a thing. You write. Apartment 2F. Mystery pipe. Possible plumbing nightmare. There's always a new crisis. One quirky detail for the night. Some Roman residents used heated stones in bed during the winter to stay warm, especially in upper floors that lacked good insulation. You've heard of one woman on the 5th floor using bricks wrapped in old scrolls. Warm, but not great for fire safety. Back inside, you notice that the duck is back. Minerva has returned. She is perched atop a windowsill, victorious. In her beak, she holds a ribbon. You're not even going to ask. Gaius will be thrilled. You end the day. Finally, sitting on a wooden stool outside your room. Your wax tablet is a battlefield of scribbles. Your sandals are fraying. You're 80% certain there's flour in your hair and that one of the roosters winked at you. You could complain. You could yell. You could leave, but you don't, because despite it, all the pipes, the rats, the duck diplomacy, you know this place better than anyone. Every crack in the plaster, every groan of the beams, every story whispered between neighbors over burnt bread and borrowed oil lamps. This building is your nemesis. This building is your kingdom. This building is home. The rooster war has apparently escalated. You open your door the next morning to find feathers scattered like confetti and a handwritten note pinned to the wall. Do something. No name, no explanation. Just passive-aggressive ink and poultry drama residue. You step over the feathers and begin your morning round. The building groans as you descend, not unlike your knees. The first stop is the latrine, where you hung a helpful sign yesterday. It now reads, thanks to someone's charcoal revisions. Latrine gives this way, brave idiot. You sigh, scrub the insult off with your sleeve, and rewrite it with extra flourish. You even underline brave. Inside the latrine, the smell is exactly what you'd expect. Ancient, aggressive, and fond of lingering. You notice someone's tried to improve the space by adding a potted plant. It's already dying. Poor thing never stood a chance. A fig pit rests next to the bench like an accidental offering. You nudge it aside and inspect the floor, still solid, no leaks. You check the drains. Mostly clear, though something vaguely fish-shaped slinks away when you poke near the grate. You decide not to pursue it. A mainstream fact while we're here, Roman public latrines and shared apartment toilets often had no dividing walls. Communal squatting wasn't just normal, it was social. You came to chat, gossip, and maybe discuss politics while attending to nature, toilet paper, sponge on a stick, rinsed in vinegar, sanitary. That depends on your definition of alive. You climb back up toward the second floor, intending to finally fix the latch on the supply closet. On the way, a child stops you and asks if bees can get married. You tell her probably, but only if they're rich. She nods solemnly and runs off, presumably to find a dowry. At the supply closet, you struggle with the warped door. It's been swelling in the humidity, which means it sticks like shame on a senator. You wedge your shoulder into it and push until it pops open with a groan that sounds like a ghost being woken mid-nap. Inside, chaos. Jars of pitch, broken tiles, a sandal missing its twin, some rope, a bag of what might be lentils, and at least 3 cracked water jugs. You take mental inventory while trying not to inhale too much dust. In the back corner, someone stashed a scroll labeled "Important, do not touch." So naturally, you touch it. It's blank. Classic. You secure the latch with a new nail. Then test it twice. Solid. You're not saying you're a miracle worker, but if Jupiter ever retires, you'd like to apply down the hall. Marcia flags you down. Again, now there's a smell. She says. You blink. The Olivanson smell. No, she says. This one's worse. Like ... burning cheese. You peer into her apartment. Sure enough, something is wafting from the floorboards, sharp, acidic, vaguely dairy adjacent. You kneel, sniff, and regret everything. You tap on the wood. Have you spilled anything lately? Lucius tried to make cheese last week, she says. You squint. He tried to make cheese. On the windowsill, she clarifies. You stare at her. Was the milk ... new? She frowns. Well, it was wet. You back out slowly. You add to your wax tablet. 3C cheese experiment gone wrong. Recommend divine intervention. You climb to the rooftop, mostly for air. The sun is already high, and Rome stretches out around you in its usual beautiful mess. There's shouting in the distance. A street vendor below is arguing about prices, while also serenading his grapes. Someone's goat escapes and trots into a bakery. Standard. You scan the tiles. Some have shifted again. You tap them back into place with your sandal and mutter to yourself like a man slowly losing to gravity and time. Historians still argue whether most insulae had direct access to roofs, or if tenants just borrowed the space. Either way, it was common to find laundry drying, people eating, or small garden pots slowly dying under the relentless sun. You sit down for a moment, watching as a hawk circles overhead. You wonder if it would eat a duck. Then you wonder if Minerva the duck would win. You bet on Minerva. After a short rest, you descend toward the basement again. There's a rumor of a new leak in the wall behind the grain storage, and if it gets into the sacks, you'll have to deal with mold, or worse, bugs. You find the spot easily, a dark, damp patch with suspiciously organized ants forming a small society. You don't interfere. You do log it. Wall leak, basement ant uprising potential. You leave the ants in peace. You return to your room for a break and see someone's slid a note under your door. It reads, "Thank you for keeping the building alive, even if it wants to kill us." You smile. You still have a duck to relocate, roosters to negotiate with, and cheese-related crises to resolve. But for now, the walls are holding, the floors haven't collapsed, and the tenants are still yelling, which means they're alive. That's a win. You close your eyes for just a moment, and the building breathes with you. The next day begins with a familiar screech. Not from a tenant, not from the duck, and thankfully, not from the rat. It's the sound of rusted metal scraping against stone. Someone trying to open the front gate without dislocating their shoulder. You grab your toolkit, which is really just a hammer, some nails, a ball of twine, and a lot of hope, and make your way down the gate. An old iron relic from someone's wealthier architectural fantasy refuses to open all the way again. It's listing to one side, the hinge worn thin by decades of Roman dust, pigeon droppings. and aggressive fruit vendors who lean on it while gossiping. You inspect the damage. Someone stuffed a rag into the hinge. Someone else, likely the same someone, has tried to oil it with leftover soup. You say nothing. You simply get to work, as you tighten the hinge with your smallest chisel and mutter. Curses too mild for Vulcan's ears. A senator's nephew walks by and sneers at your tunic. You sneer back, and he quickly finds something more interesting across the street. Historians still argue whether Roman building maintenance was ever formally regulated, or if the city just ran on informal arrangements and men like you, judging by how often you have to rebuild the same hinge with the same 3 nails. You're pretty sure it's the latter. Gate fixed for now. You're about to retreat when the fish vendor from the corner yells up at you, "Hey, superintendent. Your roof tiles hit my awning again." You blink. "My roof tiles." He waves a cracked tile in the air. "Nearly hit my son." You peer up at the roofline. One corner does look a little breezy. You remind the vendor gently that technically the awning is illegal. He reminds you that technically so is dumping chamber pots before sunset. You both nod, each equally right and equally wrong. You make a note. Roof edge replace tiles before they commit murder. On your way back upstairs, you pass the 3rd floor landing where Gaius sits, cradling Minerva the duck. He's fashioned a small scarf for her out of red thread. You pause. "She's molting," he says proudly, "preparing for transformation into what you ask." He blinks, "A higher form." You write it down anyway. Then comes Terentia, charging down from the 4th floor like a bureaucratic thunderstorm. "I filed a noise complaint," she says, brandishing a wax tablet. You squint. With whom she frowns. You, of course. She claims that the young couple in 4B has been playing the cithara late at night badly. You promise to address it. She accuses you of favoritism. You nod solemnly. She demands compensation in the form of fresh bread. You decline but offer her a fig. She takes it anyway. As she storms off, you peek into 4 bites. The young couple is indeed playing music, but it's midday, and honestly, not terrible. You decide to issue a formal half-warning, basically a friendly nod and a suggestion to practice during bath time. They agree. That handled, you descend to check the stairwell where a resident claims the air smells different. You sniff. It does, a little sweet, a little smoky. You follow the scent and discover someone's been roasting chestnuts in a clay pot tucked beneath the stair. Resourceful, illegal, delicious. You confiscate one, taste it for safety of course, and make a note. Fire hazard, yes but flavorful. Back outside, a cart rolls up. A delivery. 3 sacks of grain, a crate of olive oil, and an marked a small barrel labeled "Do Not Shake." You sign for it, haul it into the lobby, and stare at the label. A child walks past, reads it, and immediately begins shaking it. You confiscate the barrel and hide it in the storage closet. Whatever's inside, you'll deal with it after lunch, or next week. Fringe tidbit of the day. The Romans loved labeling things cryptically. Do not touch, sacred and property of Pluto, were all ways of keeping nosy neighbors at bay, or at least making them pause long enough for someone else to take the blame. You step back inside and nearly trip over a new note pinned to your door. The well tastes funny. You pause. That could mean anything from iron-rich water to a dead lizard. You sigh and head to the courtyard, stopping briefly to reroute a runaway goat that's trying to eat someone's toga at the well. You draw a bucket and take a cautious sip. It's fine. A little earthy, maybe. You inspect the rope pulley. Slight fray, you'll reinforce it later. You add to your list, well water monitor possibly haunted. Back in your room, you try to sit. You get 3 seconds of silence before there's a knock. This time it's a merchant with a parchment and a question. Do you allow rooftop gardens? You pause. Do I allow them? He nods. I'd like to grow leeks. And maybe a peacock. You blink. A peacock. For ambience, he says. You write it down, knowing full well that if a peacock ends up on the roof, someone will call the magistrate, someone will call you, and no one will call the bird. You finally sit down. The wax tablet beside you is full. Feather bits are stuck to your sleeve. You think someone yelled "Hail Duck Queen" earlier, but you're not sure. Still the floors are standing, the tiles are clinging on, and the fires are at bay. For now, you lean back against the wall, close your eyes, and let the building settle around you. It sighs. You do too. You wake before sunrise, not because you want to, but because someone is hammering on a wall somewhere above your room, like they've declared war on silence. You groan, roll over, and consider pretending to be dead. But the rhythm continues. Bang dash bang dash bang dot dot. Pause. Bung bung bung. If it were music, it'd be terrible. If it's construction, it's unauthorized. If it's ghosts, they're unusually organized. You throw on your sandals, grab your wax tablet, and head up. The air in the stairwell is chilly, still damp with morning fog. Rome hasn't quite awakened yet, just the cats, a few carts, and whoever's redecorating their walls with a hammer. You stop at the 3rd floor first. Naturally, Lucia's door is closed. No strange scratching today, and incense smoke. Progress. You climb to the 4th. There it is. For see, you knock. A boy answers, sleepy-eyed, barefoot, and covered in plaster dust. What are you doing? You ask. Building a shrine, he says. You peer inside. The wall is half opened, chunks of plaster on the floor, and in the center of the chaos stands a small clay statue. Mercury, god of communication, merchants, and thieves. Why, you ask. He shrugs. The pigeons stopped coming, we thought. It was a sign. You stare at him for a long moment. A sign of what? Silence, he whispers. You sigh and add it to your list. For see, Mercury shrine, plaster damage, pigeon anxiety. Downstairs, you're intercepted by a neighbor with a complaint about the tiles making noises. You ask for clarification. She just says, like clicking, and stares at you like you're supposed to know what that means. You promise to investigate, and she promises not to yell at you again today. Probably you follow the sound eventually to the 2nd floor hallway. It's subtle, but there, a tiny clicking, somewhere behind the wall. You knock gently. The clicking pauses, ... then continues. Great. You tap your fingers against the plaster and listen for movement. It's faint, but it's there. You press your ear closer. A soft rustling now. Probably not ghosts. Probably. Historians still debate whether ancient Roman buildings had proper pest control, or whether tenants just lived in negotiated peace with rodents and insects. You suspect the latter. Rome, after all, is shared space with humans, with birds, with vermin, and with whatever lives between the walls. You retreat before whatever it is decides to say hello. On your way back to the courtyard, you pass a boy carrying a small lute. He stops to ask if the rooftop is open for performances. You tell him no, unless he wants a lawsuit from Trencha. He nods, respectfully terrified. Outside, you check the trash bins. A recent storm blew the lids off, and now one is full of water, with a frog living happily inside. You nudge the bin gently. The frog croaks at you. You back away. You're not equipped to mediate amphibian property rights. You make a note. Bin 2 frog squatter, possible rain god. On your walk back, you see Minerva the duck again, proudly perched on a windowsill, surveying her domain. A young girl is trying to coax her down with breadcrumbs shaped like tiny fish. The duck ignores her. You pause. Minerva, you whisper, we need to talk about the roof. The duck flaps once. Message received. Or not, you're halfway to your room when you hear a distant splash. The latrine. Again, you rush over, sandals slapping, and find a new issue. The drain is bubbling. And not in the fun, relaxing bath way. In the ominous, Rome is rising from the sewer's way. You peer down the hole. The water level is high, suspiciously high. You light a small torch and lower it, the flame flickering. There's movement. Something down there. A blockage. No, a fish. No, a scroll. You blink. A scroll, floating gently in the murky water, somehow perfectly dry. You frown and fish it out using a broom handle and an unreasonable amount of luck. It's sealed and labeled. In case of empire collapse, breakwax. You don't open it. You don't want that kind of responsibility before breakfast. You tuck it into your robe and make a note. Scroll sewer origin. Check for curses. A quirky historical tidbit. Romans sometimes used sewers for message passing, especially during sieges. It wasn't common, but it did happen. Whether this scroll is a leftover prank or an ancient prophecy is unclear. You're hoping for the prank back in the main hallway. Someone's painted a mural. Badly. You stare at the crude image of a lion, or possibly a dog, or maybe an angry banana, and sigh. Beneath it, the words, strength, glory, rent, do, you, add, hall mural, remove, possibly interpretive, definitely confusing. You finally return to your room, unroll the scroll again, stare at it, then stuff it under your mattress. You'll deal with it later. Or never. The wax tablet beside you groans under the weight of your notes. Fix hinge again, frog bin, diplomacy, pigeon, anxiety, shrine, drain scroll, cursed, rooftop duel pending, duck negotiations ongoing. You lean back. The walls crack slightly. A soft rumble above. A sneeze echoes from somewhere. Below, this building is awake, and so are you. Barely. You start the morning by slipping on a fig, not metaphorically, an actual fig. Someone must have dropped it just outside. Your door half-eaten, dangerously slick, and perfectly positioned to ruin your hip alignment. You flail, catch yourself on the door frame, and mutter something unprintable into the air. The fig remains on the ground, smug. You add it to your tablet. Hallway hazard, rogue fruit. Once you've recovered your balance and your shuffle down to the ground floor with a plan. Patch the wall near the grain storage before the ants take over. Rehinge the supply closet. and finally address the roof tiles threatening to declare independence. The plan is good. The plan is clear. The plan, naturally, dies instantly, because as you turn the corner into the courtyard, you see them, two men, strangers wearing crisp togas, expensive sandals, and the expressions of people who haven't lived through 3 rooster wars and a duck rebellion. Bureaucrats. Are you the superintendent? One asks, holding a scroll like it's proof of his own importance. You nod, instantly wary. We're here for the building inspection. The other adds, routine. You blink. Since when? He unrolls the scroll. You notice there's more wax seal than actual writing. Never a good sign. By order of the sub-prefect's office, he continues, quarterly inspection for safety, sanitation, and structural integrity. You want to laugh, you want to run, you want to throw Minerva the duck at them and flee into the hills. But instead, you sigh and gesture for them to follow. The building does not make this easy. The first thing they notice is the hallway mural, the angry banana lion hybrid. One of the inspectors squints. Is this official? You hesitate. It's motivational. He nods slowly, unconvinced. Then comes the stairwell, where a small child is rolling walnuts down the steps like they're chariot wheels. The walnuts bounce past the inspectors. One almost trips. The child waves. You do not apologize. You guide them past the latrine. Thankfully, the bubbling has stopped, and the scroll has been safely buried under your mattress. One inspector peers down into the pit. It smells like something died. That's the ambiance, you reply. Very popular. Historians still argue whether Rome's inspectors were serious agents of safety or just glorified fine collectors. Based on the current situation, you're leaning heavily toward the latter. You lead them up the second floor. The clicking from the wall is still going strong. You tap lightly on the plaster as you pass. The noise pauses, then resumes. The inspectors glance at each other. Rats. One asks, hopeful philosophy. You reply. On the third floor, you're cornered by Lucia, who immediately senses a captive audience. The spirits have returned, she says. One inspector blinks. Spirits. She nods solemnly. They hate figs. The other scribbles something on his scroll. You drag them away before she can show them her rosemary collection. You make it as far as 3B, when a loud crash echoes from the floor above. Everyone freezes, then comes the unmistakable sound of Terentia yelling. Then silence. Then a rooster crowing. You keep walking. The rooftop is your last chance to redeem this disaster. You climb the final steps and push open the door, revealing chaos. GAIUS has built a duck shrine, a literal shrine, with flower petals. Minerva stands in the middle, regal as ever, surrounded by breadcrumbs arranged like constellations. Is this a religious site? One inspector whispers. You hesitate. It's new. The other squints at the roof tiles. One loose tile flutters slightly in the breeze. I'll just check that, you say, trying to distract them. You cross the rooftop and kneel beside the tile. As you lift it to inspect the damage, a scroll tumbles out from underneath. Of course, you catch it mid-roll. The seal reads, confidential rent adjustments and bribes. You blink. The inspectors blink. You tuck it under your arm. That's private, you say, and nobody argues. Fringe tidbit time. Roman buildings often housed illegal documents, rental agreements, tax avoidance records, and occasionally secret love poems to a senator's wife. Roof tiles made excellent hiding spots. Less risk of fire. More risk of pigeons. The inspectors finish scribbling and thank you for your time. One of them shakes your hand. The other hands you a notice. You read it. Inspection passed. It says barely. You exhale. Your shoulders sink. Victory, fragile and exhausted, sits in your lungs like warm bread. You walk back downstairs slowly, savoring each creak and groan of the building like a lullaby. On your door, someone's posted a new sign. Beware, the duck sees all. You leave it up, because honestly, she probably does. You sit in your room, pull out your wax tablet, and start a new page. Fix wall, check Mercury shrine handle, fig uprising, thank Minerva. Celebrate minor miraculou, lean back. You breathe. You made it through an inspection. With roosters, rats, leaking pipes, suspicious scrolls, and one prophetic waterfowl, and still, the building stands. Your celebration lasts exactly 7 minutes. That's how long it takes before someone starts yelling in the alley behind the building. You listen for a second, just long enough to confirm it's your problem and then rise. Knees cracking like old clay pots. You grab your toolkit, which now includes a spoon, don't ask, and head down. The alley is narrow, wedged between your building and a bakery that smells perpetually like overcooked dates and civic negligence. Today, it smells like smoke. You arrive to find a small group of tenants staring into a pile of burnt rags. A wooden crate nearby has blackened edges. The source of the yelling is a man waving his arms and shouting, "Witchcraft." You squint at the scene. Who was burning things? You ask, loud enough to silence the crowd, from behind the crate. A sheepish hand raises. It's the lute-playing teenager from 2F. I was trying to roast chestnuts, he mumbles. You blink. In a crate. He nods. It was windy. You consider launching into a lecture about fire hazards, common sense, and whether music rewires your brain to ignore cause and effect. Instead, you sigh and stamp out the last smoldering ember with your sandal. You write, Alley minor fire incident. Blame art. A mainstream fact. Roman apartment buildings often had open courtyards or alleys used for cooking, since indoor fire use was restricted. This, of course, led to regular fires, one of the main reasons upper floors were cheaper. They collapsed. First, as you finish scribbling, the shouting man is now blaming Minerva, the duck. He claims she flew past just before the fire and winked with malice. You can't confirm the wink, but you'd be lying if you said you were shocked. Minerva's reputation is only growing. You're considering assigning her a room and charging rent. You step back into the building and nearly trip over a rolled-up mat at the entrance. You bend down, inspect it, and realize it's soaked. Not with water, something stickier. You sniff. Grape must, possibly honey, possibly tears. You don't ask. You just move it aside and note it. Entrance mysterious sticky mat. Avoid. Back. Inside, a woman from the ground floor hands you a cup of something hot. Spiced wine, she says. You accept it, suspicious, but grateful. What's the occasion? You survived the inspectors, she replies, raising her own cup in salute. You clink rims and drink. It's terrible. But the sentiment's nice. On your way back upstairs, You see the child from yesterday, the one asking about married bees. She now holds a worm and asks if it dreams. You pause. Only of dirt, you whisper. She nods, satisfied at the second. Floor. You're pulled aside by a man holding a dead pigeon. Found this in my flue, he says. You blink. Do you want me to? He holds it out. You take it. You don't know why. Maybe that's just who you are now. You carry the bird to the courtyard, wrap it in cloth, and place it gently beneath the rosemary bush. A moment of silence follows. Then a sneeze from someone allergic to rosemary. You update the wax tablet. Funeral small turnout. 1.5. You pass Lucia's door. Still no incense. You peek in. She's rearranging her furniture according to the flow of Roman stars. You don't interrupt. Let her have that dot. Up on the third floor, a new issue presents itself. The laundry line has snapped. Tunics, togas, and one very unfortunate undergarment are now tangled across the railing, some dangling out of reach. A goat below is eating a sleeve. You sigh, grab the line, and begin retying it. A tenant passes by and says, "You should be paid more." You smile and say, "I should be paid." A scholarly debate still unresolved. Were Roman building superintendents formally compensated by the state, or informally tipped by residents? You're firmly in the underappreciated hero camp. With occasional bread, you finally reach the rooftop again. Peace, quiet, until you hear it, peep. Not a quack, a peep. You approach slowly. Minerva, it turns out, is now a mother. There are ducklings, 5 of them. You sit down. You breathe in the city's chaos, but somehow, up here, it doesn't feel so heavy. Minerva watches you with her usual judgmental stare, then settles back beside her new brood. You look out over the rooftops of Rome, laundry flaps in the wind. Someone shouts about missing olives. A flute plays off-key in the distance. Somewhere, a scroll is probably falling into a sewer. You make one final note on your wax tablet. Ducklings. Prepare for succession crisis. And then you just sit there, listening to the city exhale through its bricks and beams. You lean back against the warm clay tiles, cradle your toolkit like a sleepy child, and close your eyes for just a moment. Tomorrow, someone will complain about ghosts again. Someone will cook something disastrous. A pipe will burst. A rooster will scream. But not right now, right now. The building is holding still, right now. You're allowed to rest. You wake to the sound of chanting, not the pleasant kind, no, gentle hymns, or lullabies drifting in with the breeze. No, this is the deep, rhythmic, and vaguely threatening kind of chanting that usually means someone's decided to start a religious movement in the courtyard again. You groan, stretch, and rub your face. Your hand brushes the edge of the wax tablet beside your bed, which now bears a mysterious new entry in unfamiliar handwriting. The duck has spoken. You stare at it for a moment, then decide not to ask. Downstairs, the courtyard is filled with smoke, not fire. Smoke, thank the gods, but incense. Lots of incense. Thick clouds of it drifting out of a burning pot surrounded by olive branches, old garlands, and 3 tenants in bedsheets, pretending to be oracles. You approach cautiously. What exactly are we doing? Lucia steps forward, arms raised. The duck laid 5 eggs. 5, a sacred number. You blink. Is it? She nods solemnly. North, south, east, west, and up. You look to Minerva, who is perched nearby, eyes half-lidded and entirely disinterested. Her ducklings wobble around like fluffy omens. "I told you," Lucia whispers. The duck sees all. You consider your options. Call the subject. 2. Dramatic. Confiscate the incense. Too smelly. Join the cult. Tempting, but you've got drain inspections at noon instead. You simply say, "Please do not sacrifice anything larger than a fig." She nods, gravely. You make a note, cult forming. Step 1. Incense. Step 2. Unclear. Back inside, you find a tenant hammering a sign above his door. It reads, "Apartment to be official residence of the duck emissary." You don't even ask a mainstream fact. Romans were incredibly superstitious. From reading bird flights, auspices, to consulting entrails. The line between normal life and divine signs was always deliciously blurry. The fact that your building has accidentally created a duck-based religion. Honestly, not that weird. You pass by a bucket full of chestnuts, again more attempts at rooftop fire cuisine. This time, someone has wisely chosen to boil instead of burn. Progress. The water is brownish and bubbling, and you gently move it further from the stairs just in case the duck emissary gets ideas. A girl from 1A runs up holding a lizard. "He was in the well," she says. You peer at the lizard. It seems fine. "Maybe he was visiting," you suggest. She smiles and carries it off like a beloved uncle. You add to your tablet, "Well guessed, lizard." Possibly seeking enlightenment. You spend the next hour dealing with actual building tasks. The drain behind the bathhouse is clogged against someone's been using olive pits as you scoop out a pulpy mess that smells like regret and toss it into the compost pile. The tiles above the entrance are still threatening to jump. You resecure them with new mortar, which you mix in a broken amphora, because the bucket is currently occupied by a loaf of rising bread. Historians still argue whether Roman tenement owners provided maintenance tools or expected tenants to figure it out themselves. Judging by your tool collection, 1 spoon, 2 nails, and an attitude, you suspect the answer is don't ask. You pass by the hallway mural again. Someone has added a second figure, a duck, wearing a laurel wreath. Beneath it, "All hail." You don't erase it. Instead, you stop by for C to check on the Mercury shrine. The boy answers the door with his face covered in gold dust. You don't ask where he got it. Inside, the clay statue is now surrounded by coins, feathers, and what might be a love letter to a barmaid offerings, he explains. To Mercury, he nods. And Minerva, you sigh. The duck or the goddess? He shrugs, both. You don't argue. You head upstairs and finally, make it to the roof. You need quiet air, perspective. Instead, you find 3 people laying out scrolls in a perfect spiral, muttering about alignment. One of them waves at you. "Want your horoscope?" You sit beside Minerva. She blinks slowly. One duckling climbs onto your sandal and peeps. You let it. You look out over Rome. Late afternoon now. The sun is low. The street noise softens into a hum. Below, someone is yelling about the price of spoiled olives. A baby cries. A flute plays badly. It's all very Roman. You glance at your wax tablet, now etched almost to the edge. Rooftop scroll ritual. Drain, mess, olive-based duck. Divinity increasing, inspect mural. Again praise Minerva lizard, diplomacy. You lean back and sigh. The wind picks up, tossing a few feathers into the air. The scrolls below flutter slightly. You hear the boy whispering, he will come. From the west, carrying a spoon. You clutch your toolkit a little tighter. You are the spoon. You are the superintendent. You wake to a knock. Not the panicked kind. Not the roof collapsed again kind. Just a knock. Polite. Almost thoughtful. You shuffle to the door, open it, and find a tenant standing there. With a basket of grapes and a worried look. There's a smell, she says softly. You blink, a smell. She nods, kind of like burnt honey or angry wine. You take the grapes? You go investigate. The smell hits you halfway down the hall. Thick, syrupy, oddly sweet, with a bitter edge like someone lit a candle inside a beehive and then immediately regretted it. You follow your nose toward the communal kitchen, where the scent intensifies. You open the door slowly. Inside, the stove is blackened. The windows open, the curtains half burned, and someone has definitely tried to experiment with cooking. You step over a sticky puddle of what you hope is fig jam and find a note on the counter. It reads, attempted honeyed snails. Outcome, philosophical. You stare at it, you close the door. You add to your tablet, kitchen needs scraping. Check philosophical snail policy. A mainstream fact for your troubles. Honeyed snails were, in fact, a delicacy in some Roman circles. Not exactly apartment cuisine, but points for ambition. Historians still argue whether this dish was ever actually common or just a weird phase among bored aristocrats. Back in the courtyard, you find the 3 scroll readers from the rooftop standing in a triangle, chanting again. One of them is holding a duck feather like a quill. Another is spinning slowly. You interrupt. What now? We've aligned the building, one says. With what? He points vaguely skyward. With destiny. You nod slowly. Well, be sure to realign it when you're done. They bow, you walk away. At the laundry line, a toga is missing. This is not, on its own, strange. But what's strange is the note pinned in its place. I borrow your toga in the name of Minerva. May she bless you. You look up toward the rooftop and see the duck emissary standing with arms spread, toga flapping like wings. He's preaching something to a small group of children. You can't hear the words, but there's definite arm choreography involved. You sigh, then add, to be toga borrowed. Consider rent discount for community outreach. You retreat briefly to your room. Inside, your wax tablet is full again. You flip to a new sheet and notice a small package on your bed. It's wrapped in linen. There's a tag for your service. May the duck protect you. Inside, a small loaf of bread, shaped like a duck. You eat the head first. It's surprisingly Gooda. Knock interrupts you again, this time, sharp and fast. It's Terentia, of course. She marches in without asking. There's a leak. You wait for more detail. She gestures. From the ceiling, above my bed, smells like vinegar or tears. You nod, 4A. She nods. You knock at 4A. A man opens the door, looking both sheepish and pickled. I'm trying a new recipe, he admits. Fermented onions. You peer past him. The ceiling is dripping. A clay pot bubbles ominously on a small brazier. You clear your throat. We're banning fermentation for the rest of the week. He nods, grateful for structure. You descend. Update the leak log, and write a public notice. Nitrogen monoxide, new liquids above 3 road floor until further notice. Someone pins it next to the mural, beneath the duck. It feels official. As you pass the mail niche, you find something curious. A scroll addressed to the building. Not to you. Not to any tenant, just the building. You unroll it. It's poetry, terrible poetry, but clearly sincere. You read aloud softly, "O beams of wood, O walls of dust, you creak, you groan, but still we trust." You sigh, add to the tablet. Anonymous poem, oddly touching. Copy to wall. By mid-afternoon, you're fixing a loose railing when you hear a scream. You run. You find a man from 3D, holding a sandal, trembling. "I stepped on something," he gasps. "It moved." You brace for rat, or snake, or worse. But it's a small tortoise. You blink. The man backs away in horror. "I thought it was a rock." You kneel, pick it up gently. It blinks at you. "Where did you come from, little one?" You murmur. A child pipes up. "He's from the shrine." You glance toward Lucia's room. Of course. The tortoise is now part of the sacred menagerie. You deliver it back gently. Lucia lights incense in thanks. The tortoise is renamed Titus and given a lettuce crown. You make a note. Tortoise retrieval successful. Might need leash. Back in your room, you light a tiny oil lamp and lean against the wall. The building shifts around you, soft footsteps. A laugh down the hall. The quiet creak of heat settling in the bricks. From the window, the sun dips low behind the rooftops. Rome turns orange, then pink. Then slowly to the muted grays of sleep. You hear the faint sound of a child singing to the ducklings. And under that, silence. Mostly you sigh. It's been another day. The leaks leaked, the flames flared, the duck multiplied, but you're still here, and so is the building. The day wears on, thick with the scent of drying mortar and the hum of everyday chaos. You find yourself wandering the winding corridors again, clipboard in hand, trying to keep track of repairs, complaints, and the ever-growing roster of tenants who swear the building is haunted, or at least cursed. You stop by the communal latrine. A tenant is scrubbing vigorously, muttering about a phantom smell that lingers despite all attempts to banish it with vinegar and ash. You take a cautious sniff. It's foul somewhere between spoiled fish and forgotten gym socks. You note. Latrines. Try incense. Nearby, a faded fresco peels from the wall. It depicts a rather stern-looking man in a toga, holding a scroll, standing beside a strangely majestic duck. You stop, smile to yourself, and wonder who painted it. Another tenant, a prankster. The building's secret artist. You continue down to the kitchen area, dodging a cat that has taken up permanent residence there. The feline watches you with one eye, as if judging your competency. You nod in acknowledgement. The cat flicks its tail and saunters off, a fringe. Fact for the day. Cats were common in Roman apartments, prized for their rodent-catching skills, but also sometimes treated as exotic pets, complete with miniature collars and occasional statues in their honor. Historians still debate whether the average Roman tenant could afford such luxuries or if this was just urban legend. You pass a group gathered around a tenant, who is demonstrating a new recipe involving fermented fish sauce. The smell is strong, enough to make you reconsider lunch plans. Someone jokes that the sauce is so potent it could ward off the plague. You smile, noting that sometimes humor is the best maintenance tool. In your wanderings, you overhear a heated discussion about who owns a particularly stubborn pigeon that has taken to nesting in the attic. It's causing complaints from several floors below. The argument escalates until someone suggests hiring an exorcist. You file that under unsolved tenant disputes. Later, you find a young woman carefully watering a small garden of herbs on her windowsill. You admire her dedication. Rosemary and mint, thriving despite the city's dust and noise. She tells you the herbs help keep the air fresh, a natural antidote to the musty smells and the city's ever-present grime. You make a note, encourage more window gardens. You end your rounds at the stairwell, where the worn stone steps creak underfoot. You pause to rest and notice a new graffiti duck, wearing a laurel wreath, painted in bright ochre. Someone has added the words, "Guardian of the Tenants." You chuckle. The duck's cult seems to be growing. You add a new entry to your tablet. Persistent latrine smell. Cat patrol active. Pigeon dispute unresolved. Window gardens thriving. Duck. Graffiti spreading as the sun sets. You sit on the rooftop, the city sprawling around you in a tapestry of lights and shadows. The evening air is cool and smells faintly of wood smoke and distant markets. Minerva waddles beside you, her ducklings trailing like miniature guardians. You take a deep breath and write one final note for the day. Some days, the building feels alive. Others, it feels like it might just collapse. But somehow it all holds together, just like me. You wake to the sound of dripping, rhythmic, relentless, the sound of something slowly, methodically going wrong. You sit up, blink once, and listen. Drip, drip, down the hall. You find the culprit, a leaking pipe above apartment 3C. A bucket is already in place, half full. You crouch beside it, press your palm to the wall, and sigh. It's warm. A water line, probably cracked from the pressure of someone's improved bathing ritual. Probably Tullius and his tub of rosewater again. You carve into your wax. Tablet leak in 3 Celsius ceiling. Floral dot. You knock on the door. Tullius answers, with a towel around his waist and a flower tucked behind his ear. You explain the leak. He gasps, as if the water itself has betrayed him. He promises to switch to dry perfume. You don't ask how that works. On the way back down, you're stopped by Gaius, conductor of the rooftop opera. "We're doing a dress rehearsal," he says. "Do you wear costumes?" "Only if the duck approves," he whispers. You nod solemnly. There's a sudden crash from the stairwell. You rush toward it and find a toppled clay pot, shards scattered everywhere. At the center of the mess stands the youngest tenant, grinning with pride. "I tried to catch the breeze in a jar," she says. You admire the logic. You give her a broom. Outside, a group of tenants are holding what appears to be a ritual. Again, this time it's centered around an old laundry line, now fraying and useless. They chant about threads of fate, and someone tosses lentils into the air. You write, "Courtyard improvised oracle ceremony. Lentils involved. A mainstream historical fact. Romans believed in household gods. Lares and Penates. but also left room for smaller superstitions, invented rituals, and impromptu omens. The line between sacred tradition and neighborhood theater. Blurred, very blurred. You're called to the roof again. A tenant has spotted an omen in the sky. Turns out, it's just a wax tablet that someone flung too hard during a tantrum. You retrieve it from the gutter. The entry reads, "I'm never cooking again." Reasonable. Back below, a different crisis is unfolding. The mural on the hallway wall has been altered. Again now, the duck has arms. One holds a scroll. The other holds. Is that a sword? You stare at it. Someone has written underneath in charcoal, "Our protector, Minerva the Avenger." You sigh. You almost erase it. Almost. But no, there's something oddly comforting about it. You decide to leave it. Maybe fix the proportions, later maybe. Then you notice a new scroll slid under your door, unsealed. Anonymous. You open it. It reads, "You are doing more than holding bricks together. You are holding us together." You stand there for a moment, scroll in hand, eyes soft, heart louder than you'd like to admit. You don't know who wrote it. You don't care. You take out your wax tablet and carve slowly. Floral pipe, rooftop, tantrum, duck has arms. Now breeze jar, failed compliment, scroll. Riolu, go up to the roof for some air. The city hums below, soft now, muted, under twilight. Fires flicker in braziers. Laughter drifts from alleys. Minerva stands with her ducklings behind you like a squishy honor guard. You look out and think not about what needs fixing, or cleaning, or documenting, but about how far this place has come. A building like this doesn't stay standing by accident. It takes hands, it takes noise, it takes love, and yeah, maybe it takes a duck cult too. You sit down, cross your legs, and trace your fingers over the old tile beside you. You imagine all the tenants sleeping now, tucked in behind cracked walls and sloped floors and leaky ceilings, and you're still here, sitting above it all, holding everything quietly. Steady, great catch, Mubin. Thank you for your patience. Here's what happened. You've already received. The morning starts with an argument about spoons. You don't even get a proper stretch in before 3 tenants corner you in the stairwell, holding various pieces of cutlery and demanding arbitration. Apparently, someone borrowed someone else's only bronze spoon, a family heirloom, allegedly, and returned it with bad energy. You blink at them, hair still sleep-matted, tunic half-wrinkled. Did you? Bless the spoon, yes. One of them replies, with what? Olive brine. And a duck feather. You sigh. Okay. Let's all agree not to borrow spiritual utensils without permission. You escape to the courtyard, where Minerva greets you with a quiet quack and a gift, half a fig, expertly pecked. It sits in your path like an offering. You consider eating it for diplomacy's sake. You don't. You carve into your wax tablet. Spoon dispute, escalating. Minerva offers fruit, possibly trade. You move toward the baths. There's a commotion. A cracked tile near the tub has turned into a full-blown sinkhole. Not deep, thankfully, but dramatic. A tenant swears it's a divine portal. You lower a stick. It's mud. And probably part of the old drainage line from before Caesar's calendar. You mark it for patching. Then leave before someone sacrifices another fig. Mainstream fact of the day. Roman apartment blocks insulae often sat atop earlier foundations of crumbling architecture stitched together. Some buildings had cryptic basement vaults or reused plumbing that predated the current empire. Historians still argue whether this was a smart reuse of space or a shortcut to collapse. You head up. 2. To B, where the duck emissary has placed an urgent complaint under your door. The walls are humming. The gods disapprove. You inspect. The humming is real, barely audible, but they trace it back to a loose vent near the brazier that whistles when the wind hits just right. You plug it with cloth, the gods fall silent. You move on. There's a knock at the main gate, another visitor. This time, a traveling tooth doctor looking to rent the rear storage room as a healing chamber. You consider the risk of screams echoing through the building at all hours. He offers to trade his services. You smile. Your molar has been singing opera for weeks. Deal. You escort him to the room and warn him about the haunted broom. He nods solemnly, then begins arranging jars of herbal paste and something that looks suspiciously like honey-glazed pebbles. You return to your own room and find a scroll slipped under your door. Again anonymous. It reads, "Thank you for keeping the lights from falling on our heads." You stare at it. You sit on your bed. You write on your wax tablet. Spoon war ongoing portal in the bath. Whispering vent. Appeased traveling toothman equals new tenant. Anonymous scroll number 2 equals kind. Then you pause. You flip the wax tablet over. You title the new side, Things I Won't Fix, and you write Lucia's Duck Hymns, Gaius's Rooftop Orchestra, the fresco of Duck Minerva, the way the cat guards the kitchen, the fact that someone always brings me figs. You stretch, lie back, and listen to the soft rattle of clay tiles above, the distant echo of a child playing hopscotch with curses, and the ducklings waddling in a perfect line somewhere below. It's not silence, it's your building, breathing, and it's still standing, because so are you, absolutely muping. Here's a fresh and continuous rewrite of Section 13, so it flows smoothly from the fixed Section 12. This version preserves the tone, detail, and structure your script needs, and continues the duck cult madness. Of course, the morning starts. Suspiciously quiet. Too quiet. You sit up, rub your eyes, and wait for the usual cacophony, clanging pans, squabbling over turnips, the sound of at least one minor object falling from a balcony. But there's only silence. That's never a good sign. You step out into the corridor. The air feels thick with anticipation. Somewhere in the distance, a spoon drops. Then, nothing. You round the stairs and find half the tenants gathered in the courtyard, faces turned upward. You follow their gaze. On the rooftop, a banner flaps in the breeze. A large duck painted with charcoal, wearing a toga, holding a scroll in one wing and a scepter in the other. You sigh. Lucia appears beside you. Beaming, we're naming her Minerva, Optimus, Maximus. You nod slowly, of course. She points. Gaius wrote the hymn. We're singing it at dusk. You glance at the others. There's a rehearsed serenity to their faces. One is weeping softly. Another is sprinkling flower petals in a circle. You write on your tablet, Duck Cult Phase. For banner. Emotional response increasing. Mainstream fact of the day. Roman apartment life wasn't always regulated. Tenants often formed semi-official communities, with their own rituals, rules, and improvised deities to make sense of chaos. Historians still argue whether these were desperate coping mechanisms or proto-religions. Either way, your rooftop just became a holy site. You pass by the public latrine and find someone has installed a tiny altar above the water channel. A duck figurine carved out of soapstone. You consider removing it. But then someone comes in, kneels, and leaves a mint sprig. You let it be. A boy tugs at your tunic. Sir, the well made a noise again. You follow him to the old well, half expecting more scrolls. This time, it's humming. Not in an ominous, portal-tooth underworld way, more like a hollow flute. You lower a pebble. No splash, no echo. You lean in from the depths. Leave the lentils. You freeze. The boy whispers. It speaks now. You slowly close the lid and say, maybe it's full. You write, well now sentient. Lentil diet recommended back near the stairwell. A man named Rufus is frantically scribbling diagrams on the wall. He swears he's discovered a blueprint for the building's spiritual energy. You examine it. Lots of arrows, spirals, and a duck-shaped vortex in the center. He gestures wildly. All energy flows toward the duck. You nod, I've noticed. You keep walking upstairs. A tenant from 4C shows you a bowl of cracked eggs and asks if she should interpret the yolks. You tell her, only if she sees your face in one. She squints into the bowl. Close, she says. You step outside to the balcony for air. A breeze ruffles your tunic. The city sprawls before you in its usual tangled glory markets, shouting, carts rumbling, lovers quarreling over fish. You lean on the railing and exhale. Then a scroll lands next to you. Just lands. You pick it up. Thank you for never letting the weird break the walls. No name, no signature, just warmth. You sit on a stool by the rooftop shed and write on your wax tablet. Duck cult now has hymns, banner phase initiated. Well, developing personality. Scroll number 3, gratitude. Walls still standing, then you turn the page and begin a new list. Tenants who secretly run the building. Without realizing it, Lucia high priestess, Gaius composer, Rufus theorist, girl who talks to walls. Whoever keeps feeding the Kachu, lean back. Minerva walked past. Her wings slightly puffed, her followers trailing with reverence. You whisper, you've got more pull than the emperor. She peeps in agreement. This place is a mosaic of cracked tiles and holy nonsense. But somehow, against fire codes and the gods' better judgment, it holds, and you're the glue in the grout, the quiet center of the swirling madness, the one who knows that as long as the duck is worshipped, the drains cleared, and the lentils offered, everything's probably going to be okay. You're deep in the stairwell when you notice the smell. Not bad, not great, just mysterious. A mix of incense, boiled beans, and something you can only describe as spiritual laundry. You follow it to the second floor, where a small crowd has gathered around a curtain that's been hung across the corridor like a theater backdrop. Painted on it, the duck, again. This time, she's surrounded by celestial symbols and glowing eggs. Lucia peeks out from behind it. It's a vision chamber, she explains. You glance at the sign below. Enter with pure thoughts. Exit with enlightenment. You nod. I'll come back when I'm less distracted by pipe leaks. She blesses you with a lentil. You carve into your wax tablet. Duck chamber now operational. Smells like philosophy. Down in the atrium, Minerva is surrounded by candles, fresh herbs, and one particularly nervous tenant playing a lyre. The duck sits calmly, eyes half-lidded, as if she's above it all. Someone whispers, "She foretold the rain last week." You mutter, "It was on the calendar." They gasp, "Prophetic." You let it slide. A quick stop at the baths reveals a new crisis. Someone left garam fermented fish sauce in the steam room. The result? A wall of smell so potent it could repel spirits, rats, and possibly the building inspector. You write. Steam room now officially weaponized. Mainstream historical fact. Garum was a Roman staple condiment, made by fermenting fish guts. In salt for months. Romans adored it. Modern noses, less so. Historians still argue whether its appeal was taste, status, or just collective nose blindness. Back upstairs, you find a group mid-rehearsal for The Passion of Minerva, a rooftop opera retelling the saga of the sacred duck and her battle with the fallen spoon. Gaius directs, waving a fig branch like a baton. The cast includes a man in a feathered cloak and a child dressed as an egg. You sigh, but secretly. You admire the commitment, then chaos again. A scream from 3A. You sprint, tablet flapping, and burst in to find a tenant staring in horror at a ceiling crack shaped like a snake. "She's sending warnings," he cries. You assure him it's just age and plaster. He mutters about apocalyptic yolks and lies down with a lavender sachet on his forehead. You write, crack in ceiling equals prophetic serpent. Send plaster. Outside your door, a small bowl of water. A sprig of rosemary and 3 barley seeds. Another offering. You're not sure if it's for you, the duck, or the spirit of plumbing, but you accept it with grace. Then, the child appears again, the one who once handed you a scroll and asked about worm dreams. "I drew this," she says. "It's a sketch of the building, cracked, leaning, patched with hearts and stars. On the roof, you, standing beside a giant duck, holding a scroll that says, 'We're trying.' You stare at it for a long time, then you smile and tape it to your wall. You write, vision chamber active, opera rehearsals. Escalating steam room equals olfactory threat, ceiling snake, prophecy, drawing equals buildings. So you head to the roof again, just in time for the duck set. A ritual where tenants hum softly, while the sun goes down behind Minerva's perch. Someone hands you a garland. You wear it. Of course you do. The city below is fading into shadow, fires flickering in braziers, voices lowering, dreams creeping in behind shutters. You sit quietly beside Minerva, who leans into your side like a feathered furnace. You close your eyes for a moment. Just one. Because here, at the heart of this chaos, this cracked miracle of a home, nothing is perfect, but everything is alive. And somehow, that's enough. Morning again. You sit on your stool in the entryway, tea cooling beside you. Wax tablet already open. The building groans softly, with the first yawns of the day doors creaking. A broom swishing. A child somewhere humming a hymn about eggs. It's all familiar now. You make your rounds slower than usual. The light filters through the hallway like warmed honey. On the wall, the fresco of Duck Minerva has acquired a halo. A tenant must have added it overnight. Probably Lucia. You don't mind. You check the stairwell first, still slanted, but holding. You kick a loose pebble back into place and pause at the second-floor window. Outside Rome hums like a distant market tune. Cartwheels, hoofbeats, hawkers shouting about olives and fig paste. Your tenants begin to appear, sleepy-eyed and oddly coordinated in their morning rituals. One is blessing a cracked pot with wine. Another is practicing breathwork beside the public latrine. Someone walks past, muttering, "Minerva grant us dry ceilings." You don't correct them. Dry ceilings are a miracle in themselves. Mainstream fact of the day: ancient Roman buildings, especially insulae, were known to collapse without warning due to age, shoddy materials, and overcrowding. But despite the risks, they were hubs of life, culture, and community. Historians still argue whether Roman tenants endured these buildings or came to love them despite their flaws. You pass the shared courtyard, where a tenant has set up a tiny vendor's stall selling wax tablets with uplifting quotes. One reads, "Duck first, panic later." You buy 3 back on the roof. Gaius is packing up musical scrolls. "End of season," he says. Next one's about a goose. You raise a brow. He nods solemnly. Below, the bathhouse leak is finally sealed. The plumber, a man with biceps like amphora, salutes you with his chisel. "No more floral surprises," he says. You write 3C sealed. No divine intervention required. You pass the storeroom shrine. Someone's left an offering of cheese and a very small sock. You don't ask. The well is still humming. You hum back. A tenant stops you on the way to your room and hands you a scroll. Not anonymous this time. "Thank you for seeing us when we're ridiculous, and for staying anyway." You try to say something, but words feel too loud for this moment. So you just nod. They nod back. It's enough. Later that evening, you light a lamp and stand in the center of the building. You walk the full circuit stairs, halls, courtyard, baths, roof, and back, again listening, not fixing, just listening. There's no grand moment, no dramatic ending, just this familiar laughter through stone, footsteps like lullabies, distant, ducks murmuring in their sleep, and somewhere beneath it, all your quiet heartbeats stitched into the mortar, the memory, the madness. You head to bed. The final entry of the day reads, "All stable, most things working, spirits high, ducks fed. I'm tired but I'm okay on. That's enough. That's always been enough." Now the night deepens. The rooftop is quiet. The oil lamps flicker behind shutters, casting gentle shadows that stretch and curl like sleepy cats. You can almost feel the building exhale around you, stone relaxing, timber loosening, everything softening into stillness. Even the ducklings have tucked beneath Minerva's wing, their tiny breaths perfectly in sync. Your wax tablet rests on the table, stylus beside it, untouched. There's nothing more to write tonight. No emergencies, no leaks, no odd celestial events involving lentils, just this silence. You sit beside the open window, warm air brushing against your cheek like a whisper. Somewhere a flute plays, distant, slow, and sweet. Below, a tenant sings. To herself, bofky, but gentle. The scent of rosemary and wood smoke lingers. The walls don't creak. The stair doesn't groan. Everything holds, and maybe tomorrow there will be new scrolls, more cracked tiles, another opera starring poultry. But for now, all is calm, and you're still here, holding this impossible little world together, just by showing up, just by caring. Just by staying, you close your eyes. You are the superintendent. This is your building, and tonight it rests. As should you sleep well now, friend. Sleep deep. End of script. Sweet dreams.